All right, let's talk about strides for women in the professional world. Certainly you represent both sides, professional success in the corporate world and then in the political world. Do you think the glass ceiling is still a thing? And if it is, what needs to be still done?
So the first thing I'll say is I'm a huge fan of women.
Right.
I think we are amazing at balancing. I think we're amazing at prioritizing. Regardless of what people say, we're less dramatic. We believe in getting things done, and we can be perfectionists. We are our hardest critics. When I ran for governor and became the first female governor, they said, "What does this mean?" And I said that y'all will quit talking about it. Because I do think that there's this thing about being the first. Everybody puts this big, pedestal up that you've got to be the first. But really the best thing about being the first is that it becomes normal and people quit talking about it. And I think that really is what we want to see. In terms of a glass ceiling, there are challenges for men that run. There's challenges for women that run. There's nothing that's harder for women than it is for men. We, at South Carolina, when I became the first female governor, we were the lowest in the country on women elected officials. And they asked me what I thought about that. And I said, the reason we're lowest in the country is not because it's harder for women. It's because women don't run. We need more women to run. And so that's a lot of what it is. You look at Congress, there's majority men. It's not that they're not allowing women to get in. It's that we need more women to see themselves as possibly doing that. And then we will get through that. So I don't think there's a glass ceiling of America's not ready or America gives women a harder time. Women do have to work twice as hard. That's just the nature of it, because there's not that many of us in those roles. So until we can saturate it, we need to work hard and hold down the ladder for others so that we can make it easier for them.
What do women do uniquely better in a leadership role?
I think we just balance well. We know we can have 7 things, and we're going to make sure we look at all 7 things, and we're going to prioritize, and we're going to make sure that it gets done right. I always say, it is that perfectionist side of us. The weak side of what women always have to struggle with is we are our own worst critics. We second guess everything that we do. Men, when they see a challenge, they jump and they think about it after. Yeah. With women, we think about it 10 times before we jump, but when we jump, we know exactly what we're doing. So it's just a different way of thinking.
That's interesting. I want to dive into that because in a CEO role, a manager role, a politician, whatever. So leadership is our context here. When you say that women tend to be harder on themselves, did you see that in your various leadership roles? You did all of this, you sifted, you've analyzed it, as you said, from multiple angles. Then you make it. If it didn't work out, or did you find that was something you really had to struggle with where maybe a male doesn't?
I'll go back to my first job outside of when I graduated college. Graduated in accounting, got a position as accounting supervisor for a company and 6 of its subsidiaries. Was the only female executive at the time. I was completely green. First new job, you don't know what to expect. And I remember I had probably been in the job maybe a month. And we had a meeting one morning with all of the executives and the CEO. And we go in there and the CEO's running late. And he comes in about 15 minutes late, and he's kind of putting his stuff down, and he's apologizing. And the CFO looks at me and says, "Nikki, why don't you get Paul a cup of coffee?" And I remember thinking, I didn't know how I was going to handle it, but I knew how I handled it was going to dictate how they treated me going forward. And I said, absolutely. And I leaned to the phone in the middle of the table and called my assistant. And I said, "Kim, will you please get Paul a cup of coffee?"
Nice move.
They never asked me to get a cup of coffee again. And the lesson in that is you don't have to embarrass people when something goes wrong. Sometimes they don't know how to handle it. So in that moment, without really knowing, I showed them where the boundaries were. I didn't embarrass them in doing it, but I also let them know, don't do that again.
Can I just jump in and say that's the mom lesson that she gave you as a second grader? That was the moment. You did exactly what she said to you.
In every part of my life, I've done that. In every single part of my life.
I have goosebumps.
That's why I say
Yeah.
that lesson on the playground has dictated my life forever.
Yeah.
Because, the goal is don't whine about it, don't complain about it, but fix it. Find a way that you can show people, how to move forward. And I think from a women's perspective, what I always tell women and anybody just coming out of college is learn how to push through the fear. Because the biggest part is when a challenge is faced or anything, you tend to step back and say, oh, but I can't. But if you'll allow yourself to lean in, you find out you're so much stronger on the other side. If I didn't push through the fear, I wouldn't have run against the longest serving legislator in South Carolina. If I hadn't pushed through the fear, I wouldn't have run for governor. If I hadn't pushed through the fear, I wouldn't have accepted the position as UN ambassador. If I hadn't pushed through the fear, I wouldn't have run for president. But when you push through the fear, you live life. If you don't push through the fear, you never know what could have been.
Why haven't we had a female president yet?
It's a few things. It's about the right person at the right time, in the right moment, right? It's not that you look at all these countries that have had female leaders. I mean, America's way above that. So it's not that they're like, oh, we can't have a woman. I think you're always going to have a percentage of the population that says, no, a woman can't do it. When I was in the campaign, there was this morning show, and they were going through and they're interviewing people in the coffee shop to say, what they think. And they're like, oh, and the woman said this. She said, we can't have Nikki Haley. I mean, she's probably menopausal.
Well,
and I remember thinking, what?
right.
So, people think it's men. There's some women who don't think that, but you can't pay attention to that small minority. You've got to focus on the majority. And the key is you have to be the right person at the right time. That's true for anything. That's true in corporate life. That's true, in any part of the workplace. It's true in running for president. You have to be the right person at the right time. And, but that doesn't mean you don't put yourself out there. You put yourself out there, you fight the good fight, and you let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I love this because I do want women. I think of my 16-year-old daughter. I want her to hear and see this conversation, to look at women like you, to go, okay, we are bringing something different to the table. And it's okay to say it's different because different is better. It really is. And we've not seen that yet. And I do think it'd be fascinating to see someone like you in a cabinet situation, someone like you in a summit. We grew up, we're very close in age.
Yeah.
And we won't reveal anyone's age today. But I remember, growing up with Reagan and Gorbachev and how, those summits, that had a lot on the line. Yeah. And I do find it, for lack of a better word, fascinating to see what it will be like to have a female U.S. president in a situation like that, because I do think the dynamic changes.
Yeah.
And for the good.
Women aren't as ego-driven, and they tend to see the challenge at hand and, go into it. And what I would tell your daughter and any young woman coming in is, know that you deserve to be in every room that you're in, so act like it.
That's so good. And we dudes, we tend to puff up a little bit. Do you experience that?
You do. Y'all can be a bit sensitive.
Right.
You do. I mean, I think that, there's something to the male ego that gives them their confidence. And women get their confidence from doing. It's not about how they have to be, it's from doing. They want to prove themselves. That's where we get our confidence. So the more we do, the more confident we become.
That's really
just
good.
a different way in the way we're raised, and the different, it's human nature for women versus men.